Good morning, Professor. We are Group 7, and today we will be presenting on our group project. So starting off with question 16, do countries with higher average protein or fat intake during winter months tend to report higher happiness? So for this question, our main assumption was that winter months refer to December, January, and February. So from our analysis, the chart shows a strong positive correlation between fat intake and happiness. As the average fat intake increases, happiness scores also tend to rise. This trend is especially noticeable in countries like Germany, Brazil, and the United States. This suggests a possible link between higher calorie intake from fat and better reported happiness. So from this, we can infer that higher fat consumption during the winter months may help countries maintain energy levels and physical well-being, which likely supports mental health and overall happiness as well. So moving on, while there is also a strong positive correlation between protein intake and happiness, it's less pronounced compared to fat intake. In countries like the United States, which has both the highest protein intake and happiness score, the positive effect of protein on happiness is present but not as strong as that with fat. While protein plays a key role in muscle repair, immune function, and overall health, it doesn't seem to influence happiness in the same significant way that fat does, particularly in the winter months when energy needs are higher.
Alright, moving on to some deeper insights, we realize that the stronger correlation with fat intake suggests that fat is a more significant nutrient for maintaining energy levels and mood during winter months. Fat is a dense source of energy, and countries with higher fat intake may be better equipped to maintain physical health, which can positively affect emotional well-being. Countries like the United States with higher fat intake showed better happiness scores. We also felt that it's important to consider that countries with higher GDP per capita like the United States not only have higher nutrient intake, but also benefit from better healthcare, economic stability, and overall social support systems. So this amplifies the positive effects of good nutrition on happiness. On the other hand, India, with lower GDP per capita, faces challenges such as economic instability and nutritional deficiencies, which likely limit access to balanced nutrition and contribute to lower happiness scores. Therefore, economic factors such as GDP per capita can amplify the effects of good nutrition on happiness, creating a positive feedback loop.
Now, let us look at how long-term fat trends correlate with happiness. For this data set, some of the data cleaning assumptions that we did was to use FAO values if they were available and to clean country names to match across data sets. By plotting happiness score against average fat intake, we have built a simple and intuitive baseline or general trend between fat intake and happiness index. Our findings observe that there is a clear and positive correlation between happiness and average fat intake. However, looking at average fat intake is not representative of a nation's diet, as countries with higher overall calorie intake will naturally be more likely to also have higher fat caloric intakes. As such, to complement our findings, we went to find average fat intake as a percentage of total calories, and that is more representative of a share of a diet. Again, we observe a clear and positive correlation with happiness. So far, we have only looked at average fat intake values and not trends and growth.
And so next, we plotted the relative change in the fat intake against happiness, and there was no clear trend observed. This means that the fat intake in happy countries did not actually change much over time, and the fat intake were already high to begin with. This shows that the changes in fat intake may not exactly be linked to happiness levels, and the fat intake is likely a proxy for other key contributing factors to happiness. So, to conclude, whilst we observe the strong positive correlation between average fat intake and happiness, fat intake is likely not the cause of the increase in happiness. Rather, there are many other confounding variables towards overall happiness, some of which was mentioned by the previous question, such as a stronger economy, higher food security, and better social stability. Therefore, high fat intake is likely a good proxy of these upstream factors instead.
Question 18 investigates whether countries with lower monthly nutrient variation are happier. The analysis uses the Pearson correlation coefficient, with variation measured through standard deviation using the STD-DEV function. Nutrient fields were converted into numeric data types, averaged by period, and combined with the happiness table to perform the correlation and produce the visualizations. The first approach used the daily intake dataset as instructed, which contains only yearly values. Since the question concerns monthly variation, this dataset cannot effectively answer the question. Unsurprisingly, the correlation was very weak at negative 0.1, showing no meaningful relationship. So, we moved on to the second approach using the simulated food intake dataset instead, which provides month-level observations. The correlation is significant at 0.88, indicating that countries with greater monthly nutrient variation tend to report higher happiness. Country patterns support this. India shows very low variation, possibly due to more constrained and stable diets, and also has the lowest happiness score. In contrast, countries such as the US show higher variation, driven by festive periods and greater dietary flexibility, and they generally are happier. So, winter climate also contribute to natural fluctuations in caloric demand, while tropical regions maintain more consistent intake throughout the year. Overall, the results suggest that countries with higher monthly nutrient variation tend to be happier, but this should be interpreted with caution, as the sample covers only 5 countries and correlation does not imply causation.
Now let us tackle question 19, studying the relationships between processed food intake and fast food items. As fast food items are generally high in fat compared to protein, we're going to use fat to protein ratios as an identifier for fast food items. Looking at fat to protein ratios, we can see a great deviation between processed food and fast food items, indicating a weak relationship between processed food items and fast food menus. By plotting country-level diet data against time, we can ascertain certain aspects of their diet composition, such as their staples and food selections over changes in food preferences. However, using this fat to protein ratio as an identifier for fast food items has its limitations as it's oversimplified. It excludes other macronutrients such as cholesterol and sodium, which fast food items are high in. Additionally, there's a lack of distinguishment between saturated and unsaturated fats. These aspects may result in a misclassification of food items as fast food items. Moving on, let us study the impact of processed food and fast food consumption on happiness. By plotting country-level happiness scores against percentage of daily calories from fat, we can ascertain a positive relation between happiness scores and fat intake. On this line of best fit, processed foods will give a happiness score of about 5.5, while fast food items will give us happiness score slightly over 6. What about health outcomes? By similarly plotting health life expectancy against percentage of daily calories from fat, we can ascertain a positive relationship between health life expectancy and fat intake. On this line of best fit, processed food items will give a score of about 0.6, while fast food items will give a score of about 0.8. However, as other questions which tackle this dataset as mentioned, there may be external variables which are also causal effects to these outcomes. For instance, GDP per capita has positive relations with both happiness and health life expectancies. As such, besides fat intake, affluent lifestyles may also lead to healthier and happier outcomes.
Thank you, Amru. Now moving on to question 20. Does fast food consumption increase health risks? Could the risk be mitigated? While the World Health Organization states that excess consumption of calories, fat, sodium linked to various health issues like heart disease, this raises an important question. What exactly is known as high intake in terms of fast food? To create a fair benchmark, we refer to the Singapore Health Promotion Board guidelines. On the left, you can see the recommended daily intake for calories, fat, saturated fat, sodium, sugar, and cholesterol. Assuming an average person eats 3 meals a day, we converted these into recommended limits per meal, shown on the right. Using this, we created a new variable called the health risk score, HRS. For every nutrient where a menu item exceeded the limit, we added 1 point. We plotted a bar graph of HRS versus menu items. So from the results, both Burger King and McDonald's show that many of their menu items exceed multiple nutritional limits, greatly increasing the potential of future health risks. Burger King in particular has very high HRS values for its top 10 items, ranging from 5 to 6 points, performing poorer than McDonald's, with their HRS between 3 and 4. On deeper analysis, in the Burger King dataset, chicken-based items generally have lower HRS compared to red meat burgers. This is also supported by nutritional research showing that poultry contains less saturated fat and cholesterol than red meat, making it a leaner and healthier protein option. However, in McDonald's, the trend is different. Chicken items scored higher. While this seems contradictory, a deeper look shows that HRS is influenced by much more than just the type of meat. For example, McDonald's top calorie chicken items, chunky Chipotle American burger chicken, are deep fried and served with heavy sauces. In contrast, Burger King top calorie items like the Triple Whopper tends to feature grilled patties with fewer sauces. According to the Singapore HPB, deep fried cooking methods and high-fat sauces significantly increase calorie and fat intake. This explains why McDonald's chicken items got higher, even though chicken is usually healthier. So overall, beyond just meat type, the preparation method, the composition of sauces and ingredients play a major role in determining the health risk score. To mitigate the health risk linked to fast food consumption, fast food chains themselves need to play a key role. Chains should start using leaner protein options such as chicken or plant-based proteins. They should also incorporate grilled or baked cooking methods instead of deep frying. While businesses may not be profit motivated to shift, government incentives could help to push for the change. However, even if healthier options are available, whether people actually choose them depends largely on their mindset rather than the presence of unhealthy food. If someone's mindset is fixed on indulgent, high-calorie choices, they will still select the sinful option regardless of what healthier alternatives exist. Although there have been many public campaigns highlighting the dangers of eating unhealthy diets, their long-term impact tends to be limited. One way to strengthen this is through clear nutritional labeling. Singapore has already introduced the Nutri-Grade system for drinks, where beverages high in sugar receive a lower grade. Using the same approach, the grading system can be extended to all food items, including fast food based on the health risk score we created. This ensures that every time consumers order fast food, they are visually reminded of the health implications and encouraged to choose healthier, more balanced options. Overall, everyone plays a role in mitigating these risks.
Thank you. So moving on, I'll be presenting our analysis of the long-term dietary transition in the United States using an epidemiological perspective. So instead of only tracking nutrient values, we wanted to understand why the American diet changed over time. So to do that, we used multiple data sets: long-term national calorie availability, monthly intake patterns, fast food menus, the happiness data set for GDP and health indicators, and an external data set on state-level obesity and GDP. So putting these sources together helped us view the US diet not just as a nutrition issue, but as something influenced by wealth, food availability, behavior, and social inequalities. Our long-term data set showed a very clear pattern. Since the 1960s, the share of calories coming from fat increased substantially, while carbohydrate share steadily declined. Protein remained relatively stable. So this mirrors Popkin's nutrition transition model, where economic development pushes diet towards higher fat, more energy-dense foods. So the shift we see in our data aligns with the broader global trend: greater access to meat, vegetable oils, processed foods, and higher calorie products as income rises. But when we look at recent years, macronutrient ratios were quite stable. But even still, two important patterns stood out. First, plant-based protein increased slightly, which aligns with rising interest in plant-forward, flexitarian, and high-protein diets. Second, we saw seasonal spikes in winter months, likely due to holidays, colder weather, and comfort eating patterns. But the most important factor is the food environment. Our fast food menu analysis showed that many items exceed 400 to 500 calories, and sugary drinks are extremely energy dense. So this reflects what Swinburne calls an obesogenic environment, where high-calorie choices are the easiest and most accessible options. This environment plays a major role in shaping population-level dietary risk. One interesting observation is that although fat intake increased over decades, cardiovascular mortality actually fell. So research suggests that medical treatments like statins and hypertension control, as well as policies like the trans fat ban, helped offset some of the dietary risk. However, when we compared state-level obesity with GDP, a clear inequality appeared. Lower GDP states consistently had higher obesity rates. So this fits decades of evidence showing that socioeconomic status affects access to healthy foods, exposure to fast food, and overall vulnerability to chronic disease. So although the national diet shifted uniformly, the outcomes differ depending on socioeconomic conditions. So to conclude, the US diet has shifted towards more fat-rich, energy-dense patterns due to economic development, cultural trends, and the structure of the food environment. Healthcare improvements reduce some risk, but socioeconomic inequalities mean that the burden of obesity and chronic disease is not evenly shared. Overall, the US dietary transition is not just nutritional. It's an epidemiological pattern shaped by exposure, environment, policy, and inequality.
Question 22 is about what months should governments increase public awareness of unhealthy food spikes and what healthy fast food options can be introduced. So we use these two data sets. From the simulated food intake dataset, a new total calories variable was created by summing all components and computed monthly averages across the 5 years. For the fast food dataset, inconsistent data types were cleaned and converted. A health index was built to identify the healthiest items using weighted z-scores. Bad nutrients like calories and saturated fats were reversed, so lower values are healthier, while protein and fiber were scored positively. This monthly calorie plot clearly shows that calorie intake spikes every year in February to April, with the trend starting to increase from the end of last year. And these months align with Chinese New Year and early year social gatherings where calorie-dense fast foods are common. However, behavioral change takes time, so public campaigns should actually start in December to influence food purchasing and planning before the peak arrives. The health index ranking shows that the healthiest fast food options consistently share several traits: low calories and saturated fats, high vegetable content, no deep frying, and limited sauces. These include grilled chicken salads, veggie subs, and turkey sandwiches. So using the same principles, government campaigns can recommend items such as grilled chicken wraps without creamy sauces, high fiber green bowls, and salad boxes with lean protein. Brands like Stuffed and Stella Stop already provide scalable examples. Stuffed bowls use grilled rather than fried components, and Salad Stop uses whole grains and a variety of vegetables to create nutritionally balanced meals. These changes show that healthier fast food is feasible, tasty, and widely accepted. In summary, unhealthy eating spikes from February to April, and governments should launch campaigns from December onwards while promoting healthier fast food choices that are lower in calories and saturated fat but still convenient and satisfying. The health index provides a transparent and quantitative way to select items for campaigns, ensuring that recommendations are practical and evidence-based.
Finally, we'll explore the effects of high sugar consumption on health, happiness, and economic outcomes, and evaluate how countries might reduce sugar intake. The focus will be on added sugars, which are fast-absorbing and more harmful than natural sugars. To quantify the effects of sugar consumption, we found 4 data sets. Firstly, one on added sugar consumption as a percentage of total calories for every 5 years between 1990 and 2020, a disability-adjusted life years dataset for type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular diseases, which are essentially the years of life lost as well as the years lived with these diseases. Next, we have the World Happiness Report scores from 2015 and 2020, and finally, the GDP per capita in 1990 and 2020. For healthcare and economic metrics, the widest possible ranges are used in order to best capture these long-term trends. Now, the results actually show no strong correlation between changes in added sugar as well as changes in happiness score, GDP, or any of the disease dailies. Some clustering in the positive quadrant for both GDP and type 2 diabetes was seen, but overall, the really wide horizontal spreads imply that other factors could be at play and that these factors are not very significant. Long lag times between the rise in sugar consumption and any potential effects may also obscure any clear trends. Overall, the change in sugar consumption appear weakly related, if at all, to these 3 metrics. Now, we'll also be assessing whether explicit regulation, such as sugar-sweetened beverage taxes, actually helps to reduce sugar consumption. Using a World Bank database of SSB taxes from 1990 to 2020, mean changes in added sugar consumption were compared across countries with and without taxes. Now, the results actually showed no consistent decrease in sugar consumption for taxed countries except between 1995 and 2000, as well as 2005 and 2010. In other years, non-taxed countries actually showed a smaller increase in sugar consumption during the same time period. Next, we also used the difference in difference regression, which are often used to show the effects of interventions such as taxes, and this actually yielded an insignificant effect as well, with a p-value of 0.804, which is much higher than the statistically significant 0.05. This suggests that SSP taxes alone do not conclusively reduce added sugar intakes. Now, some limitations of this would be the fact that we only have 5-year interval data, which may obscure any short-term effects. Finally, we also explored a bit about implicit policies such as awareness campaigns and voluntary reduction programs. However, this also showed mixed results. In literature, UK initiatives like Change for Life and voluntary sugar reduction programs have shown to lead to modest initial decreases in sugar intake, but often fail to sustain long-term reductions. Given the inconclusive evidence, a combined approach is actually recommended for countries. Explicit regulations provide a top-down financial incentive to discourage sugar consumption, while implicit policies actually drive up behavioral change. Coordinating both such strategies, potentially in staggered or sustained campaigns, can actually help to maximize long-term effectiveness. Despite the uncertain outcomes determined from both of these kind of approaches, taking action has minimal drawbacks and potential health benefits to gain. And therefore, it is prudent for countries to integrate both approaches to reduce added sugar consumption and its associated harms.